Today we are moving on to a new section. Today we are passing over to a new section called the modern novel. The novel in the modern times, the modern novel. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the English novel was entrenched. Entrenched means family established, family rooted in social concerns and had made phenomenal progress. You have studied 18th and 19th century novelists. And in the 18th and 19th centuries, the English novel was entrenched in social concerns and had made phenomenal progress, very important progress, very astounding progress. The branch of fiction a novel had made during the 18th and 19th centuries. The novel reached an unimaginable level of excellence. It reached an unimaginable level of excellence or perfection in the hands of the 19th century novelists. In the hands of the 19th century novelists, the fiction reached an unimaginable level of excellence. The late Victorian writers like Samuel Butler, the writers during the late period of the Victorian age like Samuel Butler, George Meredith, Oscar Wilde, and Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy we have already studied. Thomas Hardy comprise the important transitional writers between Victorian and the early 20th century. The transitional writers during the transitional period between the Victorian age or the 19th century and the early 20th century are Samuel Butler, George Meredith, Oscar Wilde, and Thomas Hardy. They comprise or they are the important transitional writers during the changing period, transitional period between the Victorian and the early 20th century. Their strategic position made them literally the line of continuity as well as the backdrop of early 20th century literature. Their strategic position being in the transitional period means the strategic position of these writers. Their strategic position in the transitional period made them literally the line of continuity. They kept the line of continuity. They were able to keep up the line of continuity as well as the backdrop. They also kept intact the backdrop or the background of early 20th century. Actually, they paved the way for the early 20th century writers because they were apt models for the early 20th century writers to follow or to imitate or to emulate. Thus, the writers of the transitional period had a strategic position and they kept the line of continuity. And the backdrop, they also kept up the backdrop of early 20th century literature. You know, the Victorian writers, Victorian novelists focused on social matters. Their themes were social matters, morality, and religion. These three were their subject matters. The Victorian novelists focused on social matters, morality was also their concern, and religion. They also focused on religion rather than in experiments in the technical form. They did not want to conduct experiments in the writing of fiction, in experiments or in the form. They did not want to write the novels like a stream of consciousness novels, or they did not want to implement the oblique structure, the non-linear structure of writing in fiction. They followed the conventional technique, conventional method of representing social matters, religion, morality in a linear way, in a straightforward manner, in a, what we can say, in a quite chronological order. They kept the chronology, the Victorian writers. The early decades of the 20th century saw an astounding profession of fiction, astounding or surprising or marvelous profession of fiction by the novelists like Henry James, Samuel Butler, John Galsworthy, Arnold, Bennet, H.G.Wells, and Joseph Conrad, an important novelist, Joseph Conrad. See, they were the famous novelists during the early decades of the 20th century. During the early decades of the 20th century, the profession of fiction became the profession of fiction attained tremendous progress. It became a profession of high esteem, and the novelists like Henry James, Samuel Butler, John Galsworthy, Arnold, Bennet, H.G.Wells, Joseph Conrad, they were of name and fame. These were the novelists of name and fame. Samuel Butler, H.G.Wells and Arnold Bennet evinced a concern with the world of external reality. Among these modernist novelists, or among these novelists during the early decades of the 20th century, Samuel Butler, H.G.Wells, Herbert George Wells, Arnold Bennet, these three novelists evinced, they expounded, they depicted, they had a concern with the world of external reality. Their themes were connected with the world of external reality. But whereas Henry James and Joseph Conrad were interested in the hidden realities of the heart, they were deeply concerned with the hidden realities of the heart. And Joseph Conrad's the most important novel is also titled The Heart of Darkness. Thus they were interested. Henry James and Joseph Conrad were really interested in the hidden realities of the heart. Inscrutable are the ways of the heart. We cannot find out the ways of the heart. Often we will also get surprised by the ways of our own heart. There are hidden recesses, hidden holes, hidden rooms in our heart with various passions, feelings and emotions. So these things were the concern of Joseph Conrad and Henry James. They were deeply concerned about the stark, hidden realities of the heart. Henry James and Joseph Conrad looked upon life as a sustained struggle and shared an experimental interest in the art of fiction. So according to Henry James and Joseph Conrad, human life is a sustained struggle. Every life is a sustained struggle. And these two novelists shared an experimental interest in the art of fiction. Joseph Conrad and Henry James shared an experimental interest in the art of fiction. They developed a new technique in writing. Especially Henry James was the first novelist to develop this technique. which is known as stream of consciousness. Actually, stream of consciousness is the brainchild of Henry James. And later onwards, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf and other novelists followed him. They emulated him. The brainchild of stream of consciousness was actually Henry James. So, Henry James and Joseph Conrad looked upon life as a sustained struggle and shared an experimental interest in the art of fiction. The idea of presenting a story through the consciousness, memory of a single character was the brainchild of Henry James. So this is the point that I have just established. The idea of presenting or introducing or portraying or depicting a story through the consciousness of a single character was the brainchild of Henry James. It was later known as stream of consciousness. This idea was later perfected by James Joyce, the writer of the famous novel Ulysses, and Virginia Woolf. Since the greater part of their work was during the reign of Edward VII, the works of Henry James and Joseph Conrad belonged to the reign of Edward VII. Since the greater part of their work was during the reign of Edward VII, they are also known as the Edwardians. These novelists were also known as the Edwardians. These novelists and other novelists during this period came to be known as Edwardians because they lived during the period of the reign of King Edward VII. In the ensuing Georgian period, in the coming Georgian period, in the period that succeeded the Edwardians, in the ensuing Georgian period, there are several prominent novelists like there were so many prominent, most important novelists like J.B. Priestley, Hugh Walpole, Somerset Maugham, and Comden Mackenzie. So these are the famous Georgian novelists. The famous Georgian novelists or the novelists who lived during the Georgian period are J.B. Priestley, he was also an essayist, prominent essayist. Hugh Walpole, Somerset Maugham, novelist as well as short story writer, and Comden Mackenzie. These novelists were influenced by the new developments. All these novelists actually were influenced by the new developments, yet they preferred, the Georgian novelists preferred the traditional mode of writing. They followed the traditional style of writing. But the credit for developing psychological trends on an experimenting level goes to the novelists like Aldous Huxley, James Joyce, D.H.Lawrence, Dorothy, Richardson, and Virginia Woolf. Actually, the credit goes to the novelists who succeeded them, J.B. Priestley, Hugh Walpole, Somerset Maugham, and Comden Mackenzie, like Aldous Huxley, James Joyce, D.H.Lawrence, Dorothy Richardson, and Virginia Woolf for developing psychological trends on experimenting with the art of fiction. They actually experimented with the art of fiction on a psychological level. They introduced psychological trends in novels and they could succeed. They were able to succeed in their introduction of psychological trends in the art of fiction. Who were such novelists? Aldous Huxley, James Joyce, Aldous Huxley was a novelist as well as an essayist. James Joyce, D.H.Lawrence, Dorothy, Richardson and Virginia Woolf. The anti-romantic and anti-Victorian attitudes that provided an impetus to the modern poetry had equally had an energizing effect in fiction. So during the modern period, during the early decades of the 20th century, there was the anti-romantic and anti-Victorian attitudes in poetry. And this trend also went to novels. The fiction also, this trend got immersed. The anti-romantic and anti-Victorian attitudes that provide an impetus, impetus means force or energy, impetus, to modern poetry, which were the elements that gave an impetus to the modern poetry, anti-romantic and anti-Victorian attitudes. And these same anti-romantic, anti-Victorian attitudes passed into fiction also. They had an equally energizing effect. See, the anti-romantic, anti-Victorian attitude had an equally, the early period of the 20th century redefined the novel, redefined fiction. You know, the 20th century, early 20th century gave a new definition to fiction or novel. The changed times gave writers the feeling that the old method of novel writing was insufficient to meet the needs of the day. The changed times because of the World War, the social fabric was destroyed or disrupted. And there were a lot of mental trauma suffered by the multitudes, and human minds became fragmented. A lot of psychological effects were the aftermath of the First World War. So the changed times gave writers, the altered times gave the writers the feeling that the writers felt that the old method of novel writing, the old conventional method of novel writing which existed during the 18th and 19th centuries was insufficient. It was not sufficient at all to meet the needs of the day, to meet the needs of the times, to meet the needs of the day. It is a phrase which means to meet the requirements of the time. They felt that new methods, new techniques are essential to depict clearly the dislocated fabric after the First World War. They earnestly believed that the old method of novel writing was insufficient to meet the needs of the day. The 18th and 19th century novels, English novels, focused on society as a whole. See, when we go back to the 18th and 19th century novels, we can easily see that the novels during those centuries focused on society as a whole. They focused on society as a whole, as a perfect entity. Why? Because people shared a common faith, common religious faith and common values. People had common values and common faith. People had a morality, a common sense of faith. People had a common ethics. So they were able to depict the society as a whole. But in modern times, the society comprised various types of people. Various types of people with various kinds of ethics and various levels of morality and various levels of faith. So the modern society became entirely different from the old society. The 18th and 19th century novelists focused on society as a whole, because people shared a common faith. They had a common religious faith and common values, common morality and common ethics. But the modern novel is incoherent, having no uniformity or unity. Incoherent. The modern novel, the novel during the early decades of the 20th century became incoherent and as a fragmented, broken, non-linear structure, not a straightforward chronological structure. Chronological structure means depicting the things according to the dates of occurrence, depicting the events as per the dates and time of their occurrence. That attitude changed. So the structure became non-linear. The modern novelists adopted a non-linear structure because, see, the modern society also became fragmented, disrupted and broken after the war and other revolutions. The modern novelists, what are the specialities or peculiarities of the modern novel? The modern novel has become incoherent and has a fragmented non-linear structure as a result of the social and political upheavals, social and political revolutions of the times. The First World War between 1914 and 1918. The First World War dislocated, disrupted or broke the very fabric of the society. The very fabric, the very pattern, the very structure of the society was dislocated or disrupted after the First World War. Consequently, as a result, the writer was compelled to alter the narrative techniques. So, according to the changed society, the writer was also compelled or impelled or forced to change his narrative technique. He has to go on with the currents. He has to swim along the currents. So, the writer was compelled to alter the narrative techniques to suit, for appropriating or to suit the changed situations. The writer was compelled to alter the narrative techniques to suit the changed situations after the First World War. And thinkers like Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, of the famous German philosopher and thinker Nietzsche, and Freud, Sigmund Freud, the psychologist or the father of modern psychology, who discovered psychoanalysis. We have discussed Sigmund Freud many times in various classes. So there is no need of a fresh discussion on either Friedrich Nietzsche or Sigmund Freud. You know, thinkers like Nietzsche and the psychologist Sigmund Freud challenged the present situations and gave new dimensions. They gave new dimensions or they gave new meanings to truth. They gave new meanings to the conventional concepts, we can say. Friedrich Nietzsche and Freud gave new dimensions or new meanings to conventional concepts of truth, rationality and impersonality, a false personality. Impersonality means absence of human character, lack of emotional involvement, that is what is impersonality. You know, all these concepts became changed. See, one man's truth may become another man's falsehood. So the very concept of truth got changed. Rationality, reasonableness, the logic, reasonableness also got changed on the backdrop of the First World War, and impersonality. Impersonality, the false personality was also got changed. You know, inscrutable are the ways of man. All that glitters is not gold. See, a person may have a rough exterior, but he may have a heart of gold. So we cannot easily identify the personality of a person. So all these concepts got changed. We cannot identify a person, and we cannot easily find the truth. One man's truth may become another man's falsehood, and also logic or reasonableness or rationality. It also has got changed. All these things got changed on the purview of meaning. All these things have got new dimensions. So, the people who brought about the new dimensions to truth, rationality and impersonality are Friedrich Nietzsche and Sigmund Freud. They challenged all these concepts and they gave new dimensions to the conventional concept of truth, rationality and impersonality. The very nature of life and thinking process, the very nature of life and thinking process became complex. During the early decades of the 20th century, when we examine the society, we can see that the very nature of life and the thinking process of human beings got complex, became very complex, inscrutable, ununderstandable. Each individual became an island, and it was quite impossible to learn the working of human heart during the early decades of the 20th century because of the complex nature of life. You know, see, the very nature of life and thinking process became complex. This led to pluralities in narration. So this complex nature of life and thinking processes, every man's thinking process became quite different from another's. So this plurality affected in literature also. This plurality of thinking process and human nature reflected in fiction, especially in fiction. Plurality means state of being plural. Plurality means the state of being plural. Bihswarada, plurality. And you know, see, this led to pluralities in narration. People had a different techniques of narration. People adopted, the novelists adopted different various or varied techniques of narration. So it had led to the preoccupation with the sex. You know, man's concept of morality has got changed. So many novelists ran after sex. It became the preoccupation, the main theme of so many novels became or connected with the sex. Writers manipulated plot and language to create narratives that defied chronology and clear-cut interpretations. What did the writers of novels do? What did the novelists do? Writers manipulated, cleverly adjusted, cleverly took the plot and language. They cleverly chose or selected plot and language to create narratives that defy. And you know, the narratives, the stories defied, resisted chronology. Chronology means the depicting the actual time of the occurrence of events that they resisted, that they avoided, that they rejected, and a clear-cut interpretation. They also avoided very clear-cut linear interpretation. So the novels became somewhat ununderstandable, complex, ambiguous. Because the novelists believed that this ambiguity is quite essential to present the state of affairs which existed in the complex society. So writers manipulated plot and language to create narrative to defy new concept of time. There was a new idea of time. That idea was not the actual time of the occurrence of events, but the actual time when the event comes to our consciousness or mind or self. That is the new concept of time. The new concept of time brought about by Bergson's and William James's analysis. Bergson, Henry Bergson. He was a famous French philosopher. And William James, a famous American philosopher and psychologist. William James. So the new concept of time was analyzed by the two philosophers belonging to France and America. They were Henry Bergson and William James. Their analysis of consciousness, they analyzed our consciousness or mind or self very clearly. And this analysis or their analysis prompted, induced or compelled writers to adopt the non-linear structure. Non-linear structure in their writings. The writers were forced to use the non-linear structure in their writings after the analysis of time brought about by Henry Bergson and William James, the two philosophers. And after that, the writers started using the non-linear structure in their writing. What is non-linear structure? That is also called a disjointed structure or a disrupted structure, disrupted narrative. Disjointed, it is also called a disjointed structure or disjointed narrative, disrupted structure or disrupted narrative. Their events are portrayed out of chronological order. The events are portrayed in tune with the chronological order, but the events are portrayed or depicted or shown out of chronological order. According to Bergson, Henry Bergson, the French philosopher, the self is always opening out. Our consciousness, self, our mind is always opening out to the past, present and future. Yes, of course it is a truth. Our mind is opening to past, present and we think about the future. And we feel a sense of great loss when we think about the past. And we are aware of the preciousness of so many people in our lives when our consciousness is open to the past, and we feel a sense of loss which would cause a great disillusionment in our mind. But past is past. We cannot go back to the past. So actually it is a truth. You know, the self or the human consciousness or human mind is always open out into the past, present and future. Changing, all these are changing. See, past, present and future, they have fixed forms. They are not constant, they are changing yet continuous. These triple time are changing yet continuous. James, which defied chronology and a clear-cut, very clear-cut interpretation. They did not use clear-cut interpretations and they did not resort to chronology also in writing fiction. So the novels became very complex and ambiguous. And they believed that this ambiguous nature or this complex nature would suit in presenting the complex state of affairs that existed in the society after the World War. William James, the American philosopher William James believed that human consciousness cannot be analyzed into fragments. We cannot analyze human consciousness in fragments or in part by part. Because human consciousness or mind is flowing. We cannot block its path and prevent and take a part of it. It is flowing smoothly. So we cannot get it fragmented. We cannot get the human consciousness fragmented because it is always flowing in the opinion of William James. James believed that human consciousness cannot be analyzed into fragments. It flows, the stream of consciousness. The stream, it flows. That is why it is called a stream of consciousness. It is always flowing. We cannot block. We cannot prevent its way and take a fragment out of it. It is always flowing. The present, past, present and future are flowing continuously and incessantly. So we cannot get it fragmented. It flows. That is why it is called a stream of consciousness. So the chronological sequences in the narrative became outdated. So the time doesn't have a relevance. The time lost its relevance in stream of consciousness. According to consciousness, time has no relevance at all. Because past things come to our present. And even future things are there in our consciousness, in our present consciousness. Remember, past things may be in our consciousness, in our present consciousness. And future things may also come into our present consciousness. So the fixed time doesn't have any relevance. The fixed time or constant time, chronological order, doesn't have a relevance in consciousness, with respect to consciousness. Hence the novelist captured the sense of time as it actually operates in the consciousness. So hence the writers of the fiction or the novelists captured the sense of time as it actually operates or works in the human consciousness. So the novelists took the time as it operates or works in the human consciousness. They made new techniques. They made new techniques like the interior monologue, inside monologue, interior monologue. So they devised the techniques to depict the feelings and emotions that appear in our consciousness by using interior monologues, interior loud thinking, the loud thinking in our consciousness. That is interior monologue. Mono means one and log means speech. Monologue means one person speaking. Interior monologue or the talks inside our consciousness, the talks which we have inside our mind. That is interior monologue technique and the stream of consciousness. So the writers devised the new techniques like the interior monologue and the stream of consciousness to unravel the workings of the mind. Thus, the stream of consciousness novels of Dorothy, Richardson, James Joyce and Virginia Woolf came into vogue, came into existence. Thus resulted the stream of consciousness novels of Dorothy Richardson and James Joyce and Virginia Woolf. Their novels came into vogue or into existence. In her seminal essay, Modern Fiction, which was out in the year 1919, Modern Fiction by Virginia Woolf. In her seminal essay, seminal means most important essay, most important work, essay Modern Fiction, which was published in the year 1919, Virginia Woolf has explained the implication of the consciousness or fiction. Virginia Woolf also explained the connection of the consciousness with the fiction, or the implications of the consciousness for fiction, or the connection of consciousness with fiction. Who elucidated or who discussed Virginia Woolf, in which work? The seminal essay Modern Fiction, which was published in the year 1919. Virginia Woolf has explained the implication of the consciousness for fiction. The mind receives myriad impressions, according to Virginia Woolf. Mind gets myriad. Myriad means several, lot of, plenty of, several, myriad impressions. Trivial, fantastic, and evanescent. Evanescent means soon passing out, soon disappearing. And very evanescent means soon passing out of sight or mind. That is what is evanescent. So these kinds of impressions occur in mind. Human mind often gets various or myriad impressions. The mind receives myriad, a lot of, countless, plenty of, countless impressions. Trivial, some impressions are silly, trivial, fantastic. Some impressions are very strange, fantastic. And some are evanescent. Some impressions are evanescent. Evanescent means soon passing out. It will not linger in our consciousness. It will not remain in our consciousness forever. It will soon pass out or disappear. Were shattered and new techniques came into existence during the early decades of the 20th century. So, the old conventions of plot, character, and narration, the old convention, the convention of or the style of novels which existed during the 18th and 19th centuries, all the conventions of character, plot, and narration were shattered, and new techniques like interior monologue and a stream of consciousness came during the early decades of the 20th century. So this is the development of novel during the modern times, or this is the development and growth of novel during the early decades of the 20th century. Please watch the video many times as possible, and understand all these things. And we are soon coming with the live sketches and works of so many novelists, famous modern novelists. Okay, all the convention of the writer, character, and